Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming this morning. I'm Lisa Thornhill, and I'm second Vice President of the League of Women Voters, North Santa Barbara County, and I am Vice President of Program Planning. And this year we are starting into a very busy time in the league. We have a general election coming up. We have quite a few local elections coming up. And a big piece of the forums is the moderator piece. The league is known for years around moderating forums clear up to the presidential debates, which has not happened through us for a few years, and you can tell. And so today we have two experts, Chris and Tom Carson, who are going to walk us through moderating, the role, how to present, the introduction of Zoom, which has become a huge part of a lot of leagues for their forums and other activities. Tom is also our league mentor. So we are very fortunate to have these two folks here with their knowledge, and they are going to walk us through, again, how to approach and present as a moderator. We do represent quite a few certain practices, so you'll want to pay attention to those for sure. Okay, I'm going to introduce Tom. He's going to start us off this morning, and we'll get going. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I might just add that my dear wife, Chris, is much more important than I am. She's president of the League of Women Voters of California, so she has higher authority. However, we have 56 years of marriage, so we get along pretty well. Okay, so today we're going to, as Lisa said, we're going to focus on the role of the moderator in running candidate forums. As she pointed out, it's long been a strength of our league to do this. We were the first organization actually to introduce and do nonpartisan candidate forums, going way back in our history. I do want to start out, though, with a few things relating to the issue of the candidate forum itself beyond the role of the moderator, because it impacts, I think, on how the moderator has to act and perform within that role.
I saw Sarah's note asking if we're recording. I know there is a couple of people who couldn't participate, so if the training was able to be recorded, that'd be terrific.
Yes, I'm going to get feedback, so I apologize. But yes, it is being professionally recorded.
Thank you, Pam.
Anyway, so candidate forums continue to be a signal activity, a signature activity of the league everywhere. Every local league is involved in candidate, well, I believe all leagues are. But it's also important that our nonpartisan brand, which is vitally important to our role in the community, be maintained through the process of the candidate forum. We know that right now we have an incredibly violent, well, somewhat violent, but really difficult political environment. There are those who are very hostile to the things that we do. We see that all the time. And we have to be able to deal with that and make sure that we are doing everything in a way that can protect us against the false claims that are made against us. So in all aspects of planning for our forum, we have to keep this part in mind. And part of that is our nonpartisan policy. We have a policy that in election times, the president of a local league, and sometimes more than the president individually, which you would have to face because you have a leadership team, but I think so. A president of a local league cannot make political contributions during the election season. That's just period. And I think the question is, how far does that boundary go? The most common thing is it is raised in the nonpartisan policy that are adopted by local league boards, but it has to affect people beyond the board itself. It has to be anybody who is heavily and prominently and publicly involved in candidate forums, like moderators, should not be making political contributions either. And so you need to focus on the head of voter service, the moderator, and anyone who is a public face of the league based on their long history. You know, there's always the joke that after a while there's a big L on your forward saying that you're part of the league, and so whatever you do can be attached back to the league, so we have to be careful in that regard. But it's vitally important in this day and age particularly that we be aware of that. So let me just cover a couple of basic rules that have to do with how we conduct forums. There's a basic hardcore rule called the no empty chair forums. And that means that you cannot conduct a forum and only if there are only two candidates and you can only get one of them to show up at your forum, you can't have a forum for that office. It's an ironclad rule. It's underlaid not only by our own league rules of how not to be partisan, but also the IRS is concerned about that. If you know, certain kinds of nonprofits, the ones that are C3, which you are not yet, that could violate their tax status if they were deemed to be supporting a candidate. Because if you have that one candidate up, you're effectively giving them a prominent place with the league's name behind it. So it looks like you're supporting that person and you're not being neutral between that person and the other person who didn't show up. Now, it may well be that they didn't show up because they didn't want to show up. They may have an excuse or whatever, but there are the more right-wing conservative candidates who just decide that we're much too liberal of an organization and they don't want to participate in our forums. So it can be that they decide not to. In some cases, it's just because something happens. Their car breaks down on the way to the forum, or you know, whatever, they get stuck in either in Sacramento or in Washington for legislative duties. So there's various reasons why, but I know every year now on the, you know, we have the voter service discussion list online, and every year someone pops up and say, well, did the empty chair rule change? Did it go away? Do we not have to worry that anymore? Because we really want to present this candidate. And the answer is no, it's not going to change. I don't think it ever can change. So we have to be aware of that. And now I would give a vary to that just came up on the voter service listserv. Someone said, well, what if there's only one candidate? Can we have that one candidate show up? Is that an empty chair debate? And the answer is no, because there's no other candidate. You're not favoring one over the other. You know, some of them, and I know in our experience, Chris and my experience, I don't know, 3 or 4 times people were in that situation. They were the sole candidate. No one was running against them, but they wanted some publicity. They wanted people to know who they were and what they believed in, what their policies were. And so they asked to participate and be able to answer all the questions that we're asking all the other candidates so people would know something about them. So that's important, and we were happy to let them participate. Secondly, you can't allow somebody to send a substitute. Someone can't say, well, I can't make it today, I've got COVID, can I send my chief of staff? And the answer is clearly no. You can't. It's only the candidate that is believable. What the chief of staff said does not mean that's what the candidate would have said in answering the same question. So you can't allow that.
We hold the questions, should you put them in the chat, and we can handle them at the end.
Yeah, because we may cover the point. Okay. All right, so now I'd like to cover in-person versus Zoom. And this is a matter of some debate among leagues. all of us enjoy meeting people in person as opposed to on a computer screen. But there are advantages, and I think strong advantages in some instances, to be able to do it by Zoom rather than in person. Number one is it's much easier to structure a candidate forum. If you have it on Zoom, you don't have to worry about arranging a venue like this place or wherever you hold your forums. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to pay for it. Now, I put the caveat that I know this year you folks have a very nice grant that's going to cover a lot of your voter service expenses. So the cost savings this year, at least, will not necessarily apply to you. But Zoom does offer a lot of the same things that you need for a forum. So the venue, Zoom does have a translation, having a translation into Spanish or whatever other language one might want. I have never used that, so I can't explain the details of it, but I know I looked it up on the web and they said they do have it. You don't have to get a videographer. I don't know what to call those people other than a videographer. They're not a camera person, whatever. Although maybe they're a camera person. But anyway, but you know, the Zoom will record it just like you're having these recording. So those are all, particularly if you have cost savings, it makes it important. But also, it reduces the burden of work in putting one of these together. I think that's important. The League works very hard, and I know you have numerous candidate forums in all your different communities, and it's hard to spend all the time and have everybody have to drive, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour in order to get everybody there. It also saves the burden on candidates. They don't have to worry about driving either. And even more importantly, you can access people that otherwise would never have been able to participate. In the 2022 election, I moderated a candidate forum for an LA City Council member seat, and one of the candidates, in fact the candidate who ended up winning the election, worked for an assembly member up in Sacramento, and the night of the forum she had to be up in Sacramento to help her boss get through all the processes that were going on. But she was a little bit late coming into the forum, but she just went to her office, turned on her computer, and there she was participating. So I thought that was a great advantage. I mean, an LA City Council member has more than 200,000 people in their district. So those are very nice. Now, we continually talk about maybe increase the size of our council, but I don't know that that's ever going to happen. Anyway, but and long ago, Chris can tell you the story of someone who happened to be a candidate who was in Afghanistan on duty in the Army, and he participated through Skype or some technology that allowed him to, for the San Luis Obispo League, to participate in an election. So I think that's an important advantage that can happen. Equally important in this day and age is security against disruption. Unfortunately, there are people out there who don't like us, they don't believe what we do is right, and they want to disrupt our events. And that has happened. I know in the league that Chris and I used to be in, the Glendale Burbank League, there were several occasions when somebody got up in the middle of the forum and just started yelling, objecting to what was going on, and that what we were doing was wrong, and we were bad people. Well, if you consider what is the demographics of the league, we don't have a lot of strong-armed people that can muscle somebody out of a meeting room. So all they could do was stop the forum, which is a tragedy. So that's why I'm senior enough now that I can pick which forums I want to moderate, and my standard right now is I don't do it unless it's on Zoom, because I don't want to have to deal with some kind of a disruptor. They're just terrible people. Anyway, so if anyone has more questions about Zooms, then save them and we'll answer them later. Okay. We have to also think about the fact that we may be asked to provide monitors for non-league events. Sometimes it may be that they want somebody to be an advisor to how a more forum is structured. In other cases, they may actually want a league member to be there to be the moderator. So again, even though we're not responsible for the whole thing, our involvement will be probably public, and so we have to be comfortable with the way the forum is structured, even though we're not in charge of it. We have to make sure it meets our standards within reasonable guidelines so that we can't be blamed for doing something that is inappropriate. Okay, so what does the moderator have to do? Well, a lot of very basic things. First of all, you need to practice your speaking skills. There are a lot of league members that I've met who have never really been involved in public speaking. They've never really had the occasion. They've never ever had the role. So to some extent, they need some training as to how to be a public speaker and what are the right ways to present yourself. So typically, as we'll talk about further in a later slide, you have to have a script if you're a moderator. You can't just sit here and wing it and try to say all the things that you want to say. You don't have to be, well, and I'm not being partisan when I say this, you're not a Barack Obama who has an incredibly masterful speaking skill. He could really soar in his talks. And I think everyone, even the Republicans, would admit that. We don't have to be that. But it is, you have to be prepared. You have to, you don't want to stumble over words. You don't want to misspeak and say the wrong word. So it's good to at least several times go through the script, just read it out loud to yourself so that you can find if there's any rough spots in the way the words flow that you can change. You can change your script and make it easier to do that. Attire is very important. You are representing the league, so you have to look professional. You have to look, we can all define. I mean, in the days when I did them in person, I always had a coat and tie. Even now when I do them on Zoom, I at least have a sport coat on. So I have some level of what I call the professional look. Now, I don't know, Chris could probably give you advice how ladies should be dressing themselves. I won't try to comment on that, but it's the same thing. It has to be, don't look like you just came in from the garage when you're working on your car. I mean, I've seen people come into church and be readers in church who I thought it just came out of their garage, and it shocks me. But anyway, you're conveying an image, and it has to be the totality. You have to speak well. You have to be able to respond to what happens during the forum. And so attire is part of your presentation. And it's important. Every league has people who are very experienced in doing candidate forums, so you can learn from them. And it's good to, well, I think the moderators should be involved in all parts of the planning of any forum. They're going to be the ones that have to manage it and lead it and perform it, so they should be there from the very beginning. You're going to have all sorts of questions come up as you plan a forum. As an example, it depends on how many candidates you have. I've moderated a forum that had 15 candidates running for a congressional seat. In the Glendale City Council, one time there were 19 candidates running for city council seats, and 17 of the 19 showed up for the candidate forum. So you really have to plan. You can't ask one question and have all 17 people answer the same question, so you got to break it up. And, so those sorts of things are what the moderator should be involved in making that kind of a decision. Okay. again, I mentioned preparing a script. The script should, in the introduction, you should be covering who is the league? What are we all about? You know, in recent years we can say, well, we've been here over 100 years. You know, and that's important. And so we have a paragraph or two that talks about who the league is. You then have to address the format of the forum that night. For example, if you have 17 candidates and you're going to do it in a particular way, asking questions of rotating groups, you need to explain that to people so that they know what to expect and they don't get confused by it. If it's a smaller, more manageable group, it's also important to say in what order you have the candidates. You know, it's like, how did did you play a game to get, make sure the tough questions were asked to people of candidates you didn't like, and the easy questions were given to the candidates you did like. Those kind of things get accused, but I mean, if you could say, a very easy one to say is we're doing it, if they're all going to be in the same ballot order throughout the district, then it's easy. You just can get from the city clerk what the order is going to be on the ballot and say we're treating it the same way. You can do it by alphabet, first names, last names. Some leagues have done it, and it gets a little tricky, is to have people draw lots before the forum, when they all show up at the forum venue, they have them draw lots to decide in what order they are. That makes it a little bit harder for the moderator to have a script, because the script also has to have, at least the way I have always done it, I list out every question, just the number of the question, and then the order of the candidates, asking the first question, the second question, and so as it goes down, I can check off the names of the people that have answered to that question. Because we all make mistakes, and occasionally I have skipped over someone, and they'll say, wait a minute, you didn't ask me. But that's why I've always had this checklist, so as we're going down, I can check the name off on my script to make sure that I've got everybody covered every time. Now, there's various ways you can do the script. Some people put it on cards. I usually had regular typing paper and had it all typed out. If you're doing this in person, you have to share it with other people. You should share it with the timekeeper. You should share it with the question sorters so that they can see questions and see that when they get additional questions coming in at the forum, they don't duplicate something that's already in the script. I always found that I would go into a forum having as many questions in my script as were needed for the forum. Now, but then if you're accepting questions at the forum, then you have to maybe stop using those scripted questions and start using the ones that the people have submitted, because you want people to know that their questions are being used. And you'll have to explain in the introduction saying, well, there may be the duplicate questions on the same subject, so we'll have to figure out which one to use or merge several together. Or if questions are inappropriate, they won't be asked, and so on. So again, so people know what to explain, that you're not discriminating against them. And I think we always found that typically questions don't go away. So if you have problem with groundwater doesn't get fixed overnight, so that the government may be working for years to try to fix a groundwater problem, or a water problem in the community when the agriculture isn't getting the water they need for their crops, and so you can carry over questions from forum to forum. You can solicit questions from the public in advance of the forum. During the Zoom thing, you have to have them all come in through the chat function or the question function. So one of the people has to be someone besides the moderator, because the moderator can't be asking questions and sorting questions at the same time. You have to have a second person to be there monitoring the chat and filtering them out, matching the duplicate questions and eliminating the inappropriate questions. So you also need a technical person, as we've seen from trying to get this event going. Someone, because you want to set up the Zoom forum as I believe what they call is a webinar, so that the only people that can speak within the Zoom meeting are those identified people, which would be the candidates and the moderator and the question sorter. But the other people, they could say all they want, but they aren't going to be heard by anybody else on the Zoom meeting. Now, the only thing they could do that would be bad is they could put some nasty things in the chat, because everybody can look. Typically, although somebody told me recently you can filter the chat so that not everybody can see it, but I'm not a technical person on that, so I'm not sure. Okay. Now, some of these comments in this particular part focus more on the in-person forums. The moderator should be there to understand where everybody's going to be, where the question sorter is going to be, see where all the candidates and the name tags are up for all the candidates in the right order. It's also important to do simple things like check the height of the podium for visibility. My wife is a lot shorter than I am, and if need be, you get her a stool, a step stool. That's what happened. Well, in fact, I remember Barbara Boxer, who was a very short person, when we did a forum involving her, she had a step stool. So when at her podium, she had a step stool because her opponent didn't need one. Anyway, and it's also important to go up and talk to each candidate. And as you're all aware, there's an incredible variety of ethnic names that are out there right now. And particularly in Glendale, we had an incredible high number of Armenian folks, and their names are this long and very hard to pronounce. And so it's very important to go up and chat with them, answer their questions, and tell them to pronounce their names so that you can try to match it. So you don't insult them and keep calling them a wrongly pronounced name. Okay, so the gatherers and the sorters, again, that's mostly the gatherers are needed for the in-person form, not for the Zoom sort things. You have to have good, strong, experienced league members to do sorting, because some of them are very tough questions to try to merge things together to be able to identify the questions that are just inappropriate and make sure that they're close enough to where the moderator is that it's easy for them to bring questions to the moderator at the podium. I have to say, I was at one moderator at one forum where the time came I needed more questions and nobody showed up, so I said to the candidates, I said, excuse me, I have to go get more questions. And I started to walk over to where the question sorters were, and at the last minute, one of them came rushing out with some questions. So, but all the candidates looked very startled when I said that. Anyway, so questions have to be legible so that the moderator can read them without vitriol or bias, phrased in a way that they're understandable to the general public, they're not redundant, and they have the context of that particular office. There's something that particular official in that particular seat would have to deal with. So it should be something appropriate to them, not some grand federal foreign policy question or something that they would have nothing to do with. Okay, now it's Chris's turn.
Okay, you're on. And I'm using "you're on" advisedly because this is a performance and you are the conductor. So whatever you're doing, whether it's an in-person or a Zoom remote, this is what you need. You have to be clear. You have to project authority. And that deals with your manner, and you have to enforce time limits. You are responsible for making everyone clearly aware of what the rules are. As Tom said, part of your opening script is you've told the candidates in person and in writing several times before the forum what the rules are. But you have to go over it again the night of the forum or the day of the forum and read it again, so to remind the candidates and then to inform everybody who's in the audience, whatever sort of audience it is, these are the rules which everyone has already agreed to. We're not surprising anybody, we're not making it up as we go along. These are the rules. And in order to maximize the, fairness, you're responsible for the flow of information, that everybody gets the facts they need, and the enjoyment of the event by candidates and authority, and the audience. It's not supposed to be grim and fierce. It's supposed to be, this is a gathering, we always say it in the forums we do, we're here today or tonight to celebrate our democracy. And this is a celebration. We come together, the people who have taken the trouble to run for office, to put themselves out, to answer questions, to be abused by some people, and who want to serve you. And so you're supposed to be a celebration. And so you need to convey, as well as the seriousness of it, you also need to convey the fact that this is a really wonderful thing that everybody is doing. And so you need to make that clear, and you have to clearly impose time limits. So you need to take care of things like, where are the restrooms? Explain to everybody what you're doing. Explain if a candidate can't come, because sometimes that happens. I mean, even if it's Zoom, sometimes for whatever reason, a candidate simply cannot attend. If a candidate if you're holding a forum with more than 2 candidates and one candidate has chosen not to attend, you can say we have A and B, C has chosen not to attend. You explain everything to everybody very carefully, and it all goes in the script. The script is literally looks like a movie script or a television script. It's like this, you list it out, and time to the second. And that way everything keeps going. This is what you need to be aware of. Unexpected situations. Well, really, it's not all that unexpected. Candidates making personal or other uncivil attacks against others. You just have to repeat the principle of civility. Dock time if it repeats. If a candidate personally attacks another candidate, you stop it. You say, that's not allowed, and we're going to dock the time. Pledge of Allegiance. Look around for a flag. If there is a flag present, if you're in a room, do the Pledge of Allegiance. Some years ago, that became a thing. People demanding that you do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, do it. It's just another hassle. What's wrong with doing the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? If a forum has already begun and a candidate who didn't choose to join shows up, you have to explain, yes, I'm sorry, you didn't accept, or you never responded, or whatever, and you can't participate. Because if you let that person participate, it sends several messages. You're not in control, but it also totally messes up the script. If you're doing any number of candidates and you have a very clear script with timed, candidate 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 30-second response, and then you throw another person into the mix, you have to start to wing it and winging it leads to disaster. Suppose an audience member starts shouting a point of view. It happens. And you stop, and you clearly say that, you know, this is not in order, you have to sit down and be quiet. If it's for or against a particular candidate, then you dock the time of the candidate who's this person is shouting for. You cannot allow the audience members to start to take over. Groups start cheering, you know, or hissing at a candidate. Then you stop the forum, you stop the time, explain that if it happens again, you're going to take time away from that candidate, get everybody quiet, and move on. Audience members want to come in to the forum, if it's in person, wearing a t-shirt or a sign or a hat. No campaign material, and that includes your t-shirt, your hat, whatever stuff you've got in your hands is allowed in the room where the forum is being held, and the moderator has to enforce that. Now you can, and I think you should, if you have an in-person event, have tables outside the room and tell people, you know, we have tables here, and if you want to have candidate information, you can set them up here outside the room so that before or, you know, after the forum, people can get the information if they want it. But we're nonpartisan, and we are not allowed to have any kind of campaign material in the room. And if people have a t-shirt, you can politely suggest that they turn the t-shirt inside out. And that happens, and you know, people are pretty good, they do it. So, there is, before I go any further, I want to talk about more about dress. Now, I know it has become a statement sometimes when some forum moderators will say, well, I don't wear makeup anymore, or I don't do this or that because, you know, I don't do it. I will share with you what was shared with me when I was out campaigning for Prop 11 years ago when I was doing television interviews. And both the campaign consultants and the reporters, the women who interviewed me, and some were just reporters, some were news anchors, said, if this is what you should do, you wear, you know, makeup, not garish makeup, but so that you look presentable. Never wear all white. It's a disastrous look on camp. You just fade. Not a lot of spots, polka dots. lot of stripes. Of course, if you say, you know, the classic thing where you see a lot of anchor women with a bright jacket, blazer, or pantsuit, some sort of a soft color for the shirt or the undergarment. It's not hard and fast rule, but one anchor woman said, you want to look strong, but whoever you are, you know, whoever is doing the forum, you really don't want the audience sitting there thinking, where on earth did they get that outfit? And that's as true today as it was the evening she shared that with me. And I've always kept that in mind. And, you know, sometimes men wear, you know, really garish ties because it makes a statement. I guess my perspective is, what's your goal? Are you there for yourself? Or is the moderator there for the league? And what kind of image are you choosing to present to the world for the League of Women Voters? And that's something that you need to keep in mind. Now, all of this is a cooperative effort. Any good forum takes a long time to prepare. And you're working with a whole group of people, and you're working on how, timing it, and you're working on how you're going to sort questions, and you're helping to compose the script. And if you've done it before, you save the script, so scripts get handed down for decades. I've seen them, and they just get changed, modified. But once you've got a good outline for a script, no matter what kind of form you're doing, don't throw it away. And it's better now because you just keep it on, a computer file, and you just change it. But it might sound overwhelming, but you've got a lot of time to prepare. And you've got a whole lot of people helping you, working together. And so by the time you walk into the forum or go online for the forum, you do feel confident. I mean, there's the little butterfly, which you always feel that you're up for a really important event. But it is not as overwhelming as it might sound. Now, we do want to talk about another kind of forum here at the end. And now that would be information forums. There are certain kinds of things. There are advocacy forums, there are information forums. For instance, you want to talk about an issue: water, homelessness, redistricting. You knew I was going to put that in there. And so you want to inform the public. And so what you do is you reach out to informed experts, people who can be on a panel, who can give various points of view. And questions can be addressed to panelists, but the questions have to address the key aspects of the issue, and the moderator's in charge. In a situation where you've got an issue forum, the moderator is sort of like, here's the issue, and what do you think? And the first person shares their perspective, and then the other, say 2 people, and then they share perspectives. And then if the moderator can follow up with a question, if it's kind of clear that one aspect of it hasn't been as explained as well as perhaps it should be, or the panelist slipped into jargon and you needed translated for everybody else. And so the questions, and then you get questions from the audience written, and the moderator has to be able to read that and remember in their mind what has gone before. But issue forums are a really underused, I think, aspect of League, and where a moderator can really cut their teeth with less pressure, because it's giving the public a variety of perspectives. It's sharing information and not misinformation or disinformation. It gives the public an opportunity to listen to and question experts, identified experts in the field. And it's a way to show that the League does more than do pros and cons and do candidates forms and register voters. It's a way to spotlight the League's central role in policy development. And so once you're through with the election and the millions of candidates forms we do and pro-con presentations, I would urge you all to think about an issue forum where your moderators who don't quite feel ready to go up there and deal with, the big time, to get their feet wet doing an issue forum on something that's of importance or concern to the people in your community. That's really important. Do you want to tell us what some of the questions are?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm just going to unmute the people.
Why don't you what have you got in the chat first?
Okay, I'm going to,
Lucy, please unmute your,
Yeah, unmute your.
ask the question. Please ask your question that you had earlier for the,
It was answered, but I do have a new one.
please.
My new one is, we had the occasion during the last forum where a candidate had accused the organization hosting the forum of leaking the questions, and did so in kind of a Fox News kind of manner. And I wondered what tips that you might have to diffuse a situation like that.
Okay, first, when you are preparing the form, you need, right now, I would say we reached the point where you ask everybody involved in the forum to sign a confidentiality agreement. That sounds extreme, but I really think we've reached the point where you need to do it. You can, they're pretty simple. I could send you one if you need it. And everybody signs it, which means absolutely nothing is to be discussed, nothing, absolutely nothing, other than what is publicly stated to the candidates ahead of time. So that's it. We had a situation in my former league where actually we weren't, there was an accusation made and we weren't exactly sure that the question hadn't been, maybe not directly, but somehow put out there. So that needs to be clear, top security, need to know, if you say you're dead. Then if the accusation is made, then I think you just come right out and say, well, everybody signed a confidentiality agreement. Who told you that? I mean, you need to ask, give me the name of the person, the league person involved here who told you that.
You would do that real time?
I would do that. Because I think you have to face it, and if it comes out that someone did, then you say, I'm very sorry, this person signed the confidentiality agreement and violated it, and we'll deal with that. If they can't or won't give you the name of the person who allegedly did it, then you say, well, this is just an unsubstantiated allegation, and there's no way that it can be dealt with if you cannot tell us who it was.
But Chris, I can see how that would
A additional approach that was taken in this instance was the moderator did not respond, just went ahead with the next question, and then later on in the forum reminded the audience and the candidates that no questions were shared in advance to any candidate, and just went on with
Okay, you can do that, but I think at the very least you should get a confidentiality agreement. The world is so different, so different. Or maybe get that, and just maybe as part of your opening remarks, you say, and everybody signed a confidentiality agreement. Nothing has been shared outside of the group that prepared the form.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, I would do that. It sounds obsessive, and even 5 years ago I would have said, oh dear, I think you're overreacting, honey. But I don't think it's overreacting now.
Because I could see where he would have, if they would have stopped and said that, he would have derailed the whole.
Well, okay.
That was my vision of it. If you say, please tell us, because what happened is, the candidates know we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z, right, in the broad form.
Yeah.
And we had a candidate who came up and she, in her limited time, you're asking me this question, and she was prepared and read, and he's like, you're too prepared, you knew that question. I could just see how it could be derailed, but I wouldn't confront him, and I like the confidentiality.
Yeah. Okay, what is the next question? What's our time? Are we on time? What is our time? I mean, here I am talking about time limits. What is our time? Virginia, what is our time?
7:40. We're in an hour, but we can edit the video.
Okay. We'll give it 2 more questions.
Okay, it's Janet. Has a
Okay.
question. She's unmuted. So if you just tell her, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I couldn't hear what was said. Did somebody say my name?
Yes.
You have a
Is that a
question?
yes?
Yes, do you have a question?
Well, I do. It's totally unfair for a candidate in a 2-person race to not be able to present their views when the right-wing person refuses to participate.
Okay, I'm going to, with respect, for decades, in a 2-person race, an incumbent, whoever the incumbent happened to be, refused to participate in the forum. The rationale, quite reasonably from the incumbent's point of view, is, I'm an incumbent, I'm ahead, why should I give this person free airtime and publicity? And both party incumbents from both parties at the state and national level, and incumbents at local nonpartisan races have done that for decades. It's a tactic which people choose to use or not use. So you honestly can't say, well, only one sort of person refuses to come to a forum. There are all kinds, that happens. And I understand that might be unfair, but the golden rule, the one who has gold makes the rules. In this case, it's the IRS and the Federal Communications Commission. They make the rules, and the rule is that if it's a 2 or more, a 2-person forum, and you only have one person, that is construed to be campaigning, electioneering, because you are giving that person a lot of free publicity and airtime. And unless or until they change the rules, and I don't see that happening, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to obey.
And this is talking about just a local school board race, for instance?
Yeah, and then there is the issue of how does it look for the league? What is the perception in the community when you have just one person? Now, you can say, I suppose, say forever, well, only one person showed up, but still, for the long run, what is the perception for our nonpartisan policy? That's our touchstone, and it's been our touchstone for 104 years, and it's threatened. It has never been more threatened, and so I think we just have to go on the side of fun. I'm going to give you one more, and then we'll abide by the rules and get off.
I have no more questions. If you want to ask, if somebody, they just have to unmute them.
Okay, one more person. Can you unmute if someone wants to ask something? Doesn't look like it.
I do.
Okay.
I have another one. Tom was talking about donations earlier, and that you shouldn't make any donations whatsoever. Was he saying if you're a candidate?
No,
Or
if
you're a
you,
member of the
candidate, all right, your board, I'm sure, should have a policy which governs which members of the board can and cannot make contributions to candidates. So
In
if
any kind of election, or national, or state, or local, or what?
if you're having a forum for city council or school board,
Connected to the forum.
connected to the forum. And what you do for like state or federal is a board choice. A lot of local leagues, presidents and voter service people just make a decision not to contribute to campaigns while they're in that office. Because now you can trace it. When I was on the national board, there's a blanket rule. You cannot contribute anything to any federal office, president, senator, U.S. Congress. And I thought, well, geez, you know, there are 520 members of Congress. And who is going to know if I contribute to a particular congressional race? But then I thought, well, yeah, well, they do know now. And it can be used against you at the state level. State board members may not contribute any money to any statewide office, any state office. It's just a protection. Now, certainly candidates forms, whatever form you happen to be dealing with, you need to be really clear about that. And then beyond that, the board needs to discuss what other sorts of things they would want to do. Okay, thank you. And I hope that everybody's enjoyed it and really wants to try.
Would it be possible to get copies of the slides?
Yeah, you can do that, right? You'll get copies of the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chris, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is it best to give the candidates the 15 questions you're going to talk about?
No.
No.
Well, okay, there are ways you can do it.
Every one of them gets all 15?
No.
And these are potential subjects? No.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
What you can do, we have, various leagues have done, we did it at the local level. There was a particularly hot topic in the city, and we knew that the overwhelming majority of people who were coming to that, who were watching in person or on video, was going to want to know about that. So we said, okay, we're going to short circuit it. All candidates, your opening, here gave all the candidates the question about this. It was a redevelopment project. You have 2 minutes. And your opening, the first 2 minutes of everybody, you will all have 2 minutes to say how you want to deal with this very contentious proposal. You can do that and just tell everybody beforehand, because this is such an important issue and the candidates really need to take more than 30 seconds to say how they're going to solve it. We're giving each candidate, they prepared ahead of time, and they have 2 minutes. The funny thing was that the incumbents clearly hadn't prepared. The challengers came in with their very nicely laid out answer, and the incumbents were like, well, and I was like, well, that's a hell of a lot of nerve. But anyway, yeah, you can, if everybody knows beforehand, just to prevent people saying, well, I asked about, the airport. Everybody asks about the airport. We can't have 85 questions about the airport. So we're going to each have 2 minutes to talk about the latest issue on the airport.
Okay, that wraps up our training today, and thank you everybody that joined us, and hope you found it useful. The league is now going to move forward and start planning the forums that will be coming up in September and October. If you're interested in helping with being a moderator, and we encourage everybody to take a look at that, please let us know. And if you have further questions, let us know as well. And anything else today? That's it. Have a good Saturday.
I'd like to thank the league for hosting this training session. It's been very helpful. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. We appreciate that feedback, and hope to have something else in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I tried to. I really did. Ladies, you guys want to get the picture? Come on up.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it'll be nice in the newsletter.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Virginia?
Chris, thank you.